This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Global Bicycle Tours, may I help you?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to sign up for a bicycle tour.
Which tour were you interested in? We have the River Valley Tour coming up in June and the Mountain Tour in July.
The River Valley tour is in June. I thought it was in May.
It actually takes place the first week of June.
Oh, I see. Well, I can still do that. The River Valley tour is the one I want.
Splendid. Just let me take your information. May I have your name, please?
Carla Schmidt. That's Carla with a K, not a C. K-A-R-L-A.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Address?
Do you need a street address, or can I give you my post office box?
A post office box is fine.
It's P.O. Box 257, Manchester.
Thank you. OK, next. Will you be bringing your own bicycle, or do you want to rent one from us?
I'll bring my own.
Excellent. Now, we provide all the meals, so we need to know if you have any dietary restrictions.
I don't think so. What do you mean?
I mean, if there's any food you can't eat. Some people have food allergies or are vegetarian or have to avoid dairy products, things like that.
Oh, I see. Well, yes, I'm a vegetarian. I never eat meat.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
All right, I'll make a note of that. Now, the total cost of the tour is $750.
That much?
The price includes everything. Food, hotel, transportation, everything.
Everything?
Yes, everything. The only other thing is you'll want to tip the tour guide. We usually recommend 5% of the total tour cost.
A 5% tip. I guess that's reasonable.
In order to reserve your space on the tour, I'll need a 30% deposit.
Do you need that right away?
We generally ask for the deposit at least 4 weeks before the tour begins. The River Valley tour begins, 6 weeks from now. So you'll need to pay the deposit in 2 weeks.
I think I can do that. I wonder if you could tell me something. How will our luggage be transported? Do we carry it on our bicycles?
No, you leave that to us. We have a van that carries your luggage from hotel to hotel each day, so you don't have to worry about it.
Great. I have a luggage rack for my bike, but I guess I won't have to bring that.
No, you won't. But there are a few items we recommend that you bring. We can't control the weather, so you should bring a raincoat or rain gear.
Yes, that's a good idea. And I should have my own spare tyre too, shouldn't I?
Actually, you don't need that, as our guide always carries some. And of course, you won't need maps either, since our guide has the route all planned.
What about a water bottle? I'll need that, won't I?
Yes, you should definitely have a water bottle. A camera would be a good idea too, since that tour goes through some very scenic areas.
I have a guidebook of that area. I wonder if I should bring it along.
We don't recommend guidebooks. It would just be extra weight, and the tour guide knows a great deal about the area.
Yes, I see. Is there anything else I need to know?
I think we've covered the important points. I'll send you a tour brochure, and you can call again if you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a presenter on a radio phone-in show. The presenter is talking to a woman who was bitten by a poisonous spider.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Today, we're continuing our Traveller's Tales. On the line we have Amanda Toddington, who had quite a nasty experience in Australia last year. Isn't that right, Amanda?
Yes. My husband and I were on holiday and we were staying at a friend's house on the coast near Brisbane. It was towards the end of the holiday and I was about to go into the garden and enjoy my breakfast. I walked out into the kitchen, slid my left foot into my shoe and felt a tiny sting. It was pretty painless, but I shook the shoe off my foot and saw this tiny spider running out as the shoe hit the wall. Anyway, not being an expert, I presumed the worst, that I'd been bitten by something that was going to kill me, and I completely lost control. I don't think I've ever screamed so much in all my life. We'd been told beforehand to always check our shoes before putting them on, as it's a common way to get bitten. So I suppose it was my own fault, really.
So what was it that had bitten you?
Tony, that's our Australian friend, he immediately asked me if I knew what had bitten me, and I pointed to the corner of the room where I'd last seen the spider. He picked up a jar and found the creature in the corner where the shoe had hit the floor. "It's a redback," he said, and he gently placed the jar over the spider. The funny thing was, we'd been talking about some of the creatures we needed to be careful of a few days previously, and as he said the name redback, the conversation came flooding back to me. In particular, the fact that the bite can be extremely painful. I've found out since that the redback is from the same family as the black widow spider, and it's the female that does the damage, which it turned out was what I'd been bitten by.
You must have been absolutely petrified.
You can say that again. I remember feeling quite confused. I wasn't in a great deal of pain to begin with, and yet I could see from our friends' faces that they were concerned. Tony explained that the venom or poison of the bite spreads quite slowly, so the pain doesn't feel too bad at first. Gwen, Tony's wife, brought an ice pack, and Tony held it against the bite to make it less painful. Apparently, you're not supposed to put a bandage on the area, as this can make it hurt even more. Tony tried to put my mind at rest by explaining that this was quite a common bite, that the hospital would have an antivenom, and that everything would be okay. But I was beginning to panic. We were flying back to the UK the next day, and I really didn't know what to do.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So what did you do?
Well, Tony phoned the doctor, who told him to check my symptoms for the next hour or two. As time went on, the pain became very intense, from my foot right up to my knee. My husband was on the internet and was reading out the possible symptoms. I wasn't feeling sick, and I hadn't yet developed a fever, but I had a terrible headache, and my foot was beginning to swell up. At this point, Tony decided to take me to the local hospital to be on the safe side. I really didn't want to go, as I had visions of being kept in for days and all our plans being spoilt. But Tony and my husband insisted. When we got to the hospital, I was relieved to see how casual everyone was when Tony explained I'd been bitten by a red-back spider. They told me to take a seat and got on with their work.
And did you receive any treatment?
By the time I got to see a doctor, the pain was very intense indeed, and I was getting quite upset. The doctor decided to give me a dose of an antivenom, which he assured me would eventually deal with the problem. Unfortunately, he also explained that it wouldn't have an immediate effect and the symptoms might last for several days. But the story has a happy ending. My husband managed to book us onto another plane 1 week later. And even better news was that the symptoms of the bite finally cleared up after about 24 hours. Within a couple of days, I was back to normal again. So thanks to the spider, we managed to extend our holiday by a week.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You are going to hear part of a lecture on some useful information for your travelling around Britain. Listen to the lecture and complete the notes below.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Good afternoon and welcome to the session on Britain. This afternoon I would like to provide some useful information for you about travelling around Britain. Britain has over 700 tourist information centres. You will find them at major ports, airports, stations, historic landmarks and towns, and holiday centres. So just look out for this sign that says Tourist Information. The staff will be able to answer your holiday queries, as well as provide essential maps, guides and brochures. Tourist information centres at major ports and airports in London and addresses of British Tourist Authority European offices are all listed on the Tourist Information Centres. Now, let's talk about the telephone in Britain. You know, Britain is well supplied with public telephones. Street kiosks take lop coins. In city centres, mainline railway stations, airports and central London underground stations, payphones and card phones are in operation. For the latter, small plastic phone cards are used, and these come in 10, 20, 40, 100 and 200 units and can be bought at post offices, news kiosks, station bars and shops where the green and white card phone sign is displayed.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
When using the different public telephone systems, make sure you read the dialing instructions carefully. Now let's see the banks in Britain. There are 24-hour banks at London's two main airports. One is Heathrow and the other is Gatwick. Otherwise, banks are normally open from 9:30 to 3:30, Monday to Friday. Barclays Bank and National Westminster Bank offer a Saturday morning service at some of their branches. National Gyrobanks has 42 bureaux de change located in post offices throughout the country in main tourist areas. Opening hours are 9 to 5:30 weekdays, 9 to 12:30 Saturday mornings. One exception to this is the Trafalgar Square office, whose opening hours are 8 to 8 weekdays and Saturdays, and 10 to 5 on Sundays. The bureau de change services are available to overseas visitors. Visitors can change their money there. You can also change money at bureau de change, large hotels, department stores and travel agents. Be sure to check in advance the rate of exchange and the commission charged, as these vary considerably. Wherever possible, you are advised to use the bank or bureau de change, which conforms to the BTA Code of Conduct. In most cases, this is indicated by display of the code.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. You will hear a talk on the topic of time perspectives. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I'm going to be talking about time. Specifically, I'll be looking at how people think about time and how these time perspectives structure our lives. According to social psychologists, there are 6 ways of thinking about time, which are called personal time zones. The first 2 are based in the past. Past positive thinkers spend most of their time in a state of nostalgia, fondly remembering moments such as birthdays, marriages, and important achievements in their life. These are the kinds of people who keep family records, books, and photo albums. People living in the past negative time zone are also absorbed by earlier times, but they focus on all the bad things, regrets, failures, poor decisions. They spend a lot of time thinking about how life could have been. Then, we have people who live in the present. Present hedonists are driven by pleasure and immediate sensation. Their life motto is to have a good time and avoid pain. Present fatalists live in the moment too, but they believe this moment is the product of circumstances entirely beyond their control. It's their fate, whether it's poverty, religion, or society itself. Something stops these people from believing they can play a role in changing their outcomes in life. Life simply is, and that's that. Looking at the future time zone, we can see that people classified as future active are the planners and go-getters. They work rather than play and resist temptation. Decisions are made based on potential consequences, not on the experience itself. A second future-orientated perspective, future fatalistic, is driven by the certainty of life after death and some kind of a judgment day when they will be assessed on how virtuously they have lived and what success they have had in their lives. Okay, let's move on. You might ask, how do these time zones affect our lives? Well, let's start at the beginning. Everyone is brought into this world as a present hedonist. No exceptions. Our initial needs and demands, to be warm, secure, fed, and watered, all stem from the present moment. But things change when we enter formal education. We're taught to stop existing in the moment and to begin thinking about future outcomes. But did you know that every 9 seconds a child in the USA drops out of school? For boys, the rate is much higher than for girls. We could easily say, well, boys just aren't as bright as girls. But the evidence doesn't support this. A recent study states that boys in America, by the age of 21, have spent 10,000 hours playing video games. The research suggests that they'll never fit in the traditional classroom because these boys require a situation where they have the ability to manage their own learning environment. Now, let's look at the way we do prevention education. All prevention education is aimed at a future time zone. We say, don't smoke or you'll get cancer. Get good grades or you won't get a good job. But with present-orientated kids, that just doesn't work. Although they understand the potentially negative consequences of their actions, they persist with the behavior because they're not living for the future. They're in the moment right now. We can't use logic, and it's no use reminding them of potential fallout from their decisions or previous errors of judgment. We've got to get in their minds just as they're about to make a choice. Time perspectives make a big difference in how we value and use our time. When Americans are asked how busy they are, the vast majority report being busier than ever before. They admit to sacrificing their relationships, personal time, and a good night's sleep for their success. 20 years ago, 60% of Americans had sit-down dinners with their families, and now only 20% do. But when they're asked what they would do with an 8-day week, they say, that'd be great. They would spend that time laboring away to achieve more. They're constantly trying to get ahead, to get toward a future point of happiness. So, it's really important to be aware of how other people think about time. We tend to think, that person's really irresponsible, or that guy's power hungry. But often, what we're looking at is not fundamental differences of personality, but really just different ways of thinking about time. Seeing these conflicts as differences in time perspective, rather than distinctions of character, can facilitate more effective cooperation between people and get the most out of each person's individual strengths.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.